Welcome to the Monday Monologue, and today I want to do a pretty serious video, and this is something I've been talking about for a long time, and I think that we've got to do something as consumers about this problem. I was made aware about a month ago the FTC made a new ruling on power ratings for audio amplifiers, and clearly someone's put this on their radar, and for good reason. You guys have seen me endlessly testing products on this channel that come nowhere close to their rated on the box or in their advertising ratings. Start with this Noob Sound 6P1. That's what's kicked off this channel, really, was trying to fix this piece of crap that's sold on Amazon to consumers as a 6.8 watt tube amp when this thing just flatlines at 1.8 watts or 1.5 watts, I think it was, and is nowhere close to meeting the THD requirements that have been in place since the 1970s when the FTC made their initial ruling on power amplifiers after the wattage wars and people exaggerating amplifier power back in the late 1960s and the 70s. And they did this for consumer protections so that people know that when something's advertised as being 6.8 watts or 300 watts, that in use you're comparing the same things to something like a Macintosh amp or some other, high quality amplifier that is not exaggerating their ratings. And allowing these manufacturers to just make up whatever numbers they want to make up is killing the audio industry, especially like tube amp builders like me and Deckware and some of these other folks. Obviously Deckware is doing fine right now, but when you've got players that are disingenuous about what their products can actually do, then it harms people that are actually building quality gear because they're having to compete in a market where, if we're being honest, people go, why should I pay $2,000 for one of your amplifiers when I can get the same thing for $300? And if you look at the specs, this thing outperforms what my stated specs are, when in reality it's not even close. So what the FTC just released, and this was about a month ago on April 16th, any power level from 250 milliwatt to the rated power shall be obtainable at all frequencies within the rated power rating from 20 Hz to 20K without exceeding 1% of total harmonic distortion plus noise and an impedance of 8 ohms. After input signals of said frequencies have been continuously applied at full power rating for not less than 5 minutes at the amplifier's auxiliary input. Okay, and then it goes into an exception for subwoofer amplifiers, which makes sense. They're not going to have that same frequency range. So let's look at some of these things we've been reviewing lately. This Musical Paradise amp, the MP301, it's been on the market for decades. It's had 3 revisions. So if they were going to fix this amplifier, they've had ample opportunity to. They rate this thing, I think, at 8 watts, something like that. I'll put it up here. I got to go look it up. You saw from the frequency response curve, 20 Hertz is down 7 dBs or more. So it's not making that power at 20 Hertz. It ain't making that power anywhere close to that. It's rolled off 3 dB at 40 Hertz. And so if you're trying to compare the power output of this to an output of an amplifier that can actually make power down at 20 or 40 Hertz, it's not apples and oranges. And the THD was off the scale when you start getting this. It starts out at 1% THD. So it's not even making 100 milliwatts and under 1% THD. Go to their website, they're claiming something 1/10 of that, and they're not saying at what power level it's doing that. And so this has created a situation where legit amplifier manufacturers are having to compete against the price point of products like this, and they're not willing to make junk. Same thing with this Noob Sound 6P1. People say, why should I buy a $2,000 amplifier or even a $1,000 amplifier when I can get this one for $250 and it makes 6.8 watts? Where it wouldn't make that on a bet. Even if you modify it, it doesn't even get close to that. These are 5-watt rated output transformers, and they're claiming it's making more power than these output transformers are capable of doing before they saturate. And what they're doing is they're taking the max possible power rating off the tube data sheet, multiplying it times 2 because they stick 2 of these in here, even though they're not running anywhere close to their maximum potential. They just doubled these up so they could fake the output rating to confuse consumers into thinking that this is something that it's not. And I'm going to pick on these little Class D amps now too. They're going into 2 ohms at their rating. How many of us own 2 ohm speakers that you wouldn't have to buy specifically 2 ohm speakers to use with this? Okay, then they have ratings based on a 48 volt brick with the smaller one when they give you a 36 volt one. So what comes in the box isn't even close to what they're saying. And then they got 300 plus 300, trying to make people believe that it's a 300 watt amplifier. And according to this ruling, and let me find this part, the rated power output is disclosed clearly, conspicuously, and more prominently than any other representations or disclosures permitted. The disclosure of the rated power output is clearly and conspicuously labeled FTC power output rating. The disclosures or representations required under this section shall not be made by a footnote, an asterisk, or a similar notation. And then it says the rated output power is measured in compliance with the standard conditions in 432.3, which is what I just read to you. So, they do have in here that if you want to have other power output expressed in a minimum watts per channel and clearly and conspicuously labeled, this rating was not tested under the FTC standard without the use of a footnote, asterisk, or similar notation to make the representation. And it has to be less conspicuous and less prominently made than the FTC rated power. Guys, we need to start holding these manufacturers accountable. We need to start holding Amazon accountable for advertising this BS that we know isn't true. And I plan on writing my congressman and telling him how important this is and how they need to start regulating this. And specifically when we have these made in China products that are bloating their advertising to be sold in this country, that's causing harm to legit manufacturers that are trying to do the right thing. Because without these ratings, there's no way to be able to compare A and B without listening to it. And one of the big problems that I'm seeing, honestly, is the consumers. Every time I start talking about one of these products that was clearly tested to be substandard, when I did the review on this thing, I got lit up by fanboys of this product saying, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. That thing's great. It's got plenty of bass, blah, 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 blah. And the only thing I can figure is some folks feel like when you point out a defect in some product that they got hoodwinked into buying, they take it as a personal attack on them. Instead of going, hey, I was wronged by someone and I was sold something that wasn't as advertised. We have to stop doing that as a society. We got to start standing up for ourselves and going, hey, somebody sold me something, told me it was A when it's actually B, and it's not even 1/10 of what I was sold, and demanding your money back, or it's probably going to end up taking a class action lawsuit against some of these companies to get them to stop doing this. Another example, like I said, besides this, is some of the Wilsonton products that we've reviewed. We've had the same issue with them, like that R300. Now, the R8 actually measured close to what they advertised. Not sure that it made 45 watts at 1% distortion. I think it was more like 2%. But it was at least in the ballpark. And it had good frequency response down on the low end and the top end. But like the R8, according to this, it has to make power between 20 hertz and 20K. We all saw where it dove down to like negative 20 dBs at 15K, which is within the range of this thing. There's no way that amp was making the rated power from 20 to 20K. It's not possible. But they get away with it, and they're still selling them. And Amazon's still promoting that stuff, as well as other, we can't do anything about like China Hi-Fi and these other, websites where they're selling these things from China. But I'm not sure that once they start shipping those things into this country, these rules should apply. And they absolutely should apply on anything that's sold by a retailer in the U.S. And so, yeah, this may be my new thing that I champion, is getting these rules enforced across the audio spectrum. And obviously some of these little small boutique manufacturers are telling you what it is. Hey, if I have to go and get a FTC rating to meet these rules for my amps, and I have to publish that my EL34 at 20 hertz is only making 2 watts of power, I just do that. Because you can put a smaller reference underneath it explaining, hey, this is a tube amp. Given the size of these output transformers, it's not going to have the 20 hertz frequency response that some larger amps may have in actual use with normal speakers. Between 40K and 12K, it's making 7 watts or 6 watts of usable power. And I've told you guys that my little amp, don't expect this thing to be run at 7 watts, which is what it hits before clipping at 1K. Don't expect to run it there. It's really a 2 to 4 watt amp, and that's the usable range of it. And you need speakers that are happy in that range. And again, if I have to, downrate it to meet these standards, I don't have any problem with that. Honestly, guys, I don't care if I even sell those things. I mean, I'm just doing this because it's fun. But when you have things like this being rated at 6.8 watts, which is the same watts that my EL34, I'm telling you, peaks at, they're saying this thing peaks at the same place. When you actually test it into 8 ohms, it's making less than 1.5 watts. That's just wrong. And we've got to figure out a way to stand up to these bullies that are doing this. And like with this little amp, I'm telling you guys, hey, in the range that it sounds good, it's probably really making 5 to maybe 8 watts or something like that. And once you get over that, you start hearing the distortion. And like one THD out of this thing is going to sound nasty compared to what 1 THD of this is going to sound like. Because tube amps definitely sound okay with 1 to 2% THD. So when I started saying that, and I got lit on fire by all you Class D guys saying, well, the mirror says that, this voltage level into this ohms of speaker and you got this many amp power supply, which none of them come with those 10 amp power supplies. You have to go buy them. So if it's not in the box, how are you using that for the rating? And then to say this thing's even making 55 watts at 5% THD. Nobody's going to listen to a Class D amp at 5% THD. So that's why they're saying, hey, the cutoff's 1%. And it used to be 0.1%. But they listened to some manufacturers, especially of tube amps, that were saying, hey, we can't meet that with tube gear. And so the federal government listened to them, looked into it, and said, okay, we're going to raise it to 1%, which is reasonable for a tube amp. And then, the consumer can decide. You can put in smaller print, like it says. Big print, my amp might say that, it makes 3 watts at the FTC rating. And then below it, you can say it makes 7 watts at 2% THD in smaller print. Or 3%, or whatever it is. Or, it starts clipping it, whatever. You can put all that into the advertising, but you have to put the real number. And I think somehow this has got to start. So, I know this sounds kind of like a rant, but I just feel like consumers are getting screwed by so many manufacturers with bogus numbers. And maybe it's a sign that hi-fi is coming back into vogue, because they did this in the 70s when everybody was buying those Marantz receivers and Technics turntables and, Jensen speakers and all, whatever, all these Bose speakers and stuff. They were, kind of a heyday of hi-fi. And then it kind of just tapered off when, MP3 players and earbuds and all that kind of stuff kind of came into vogue. And I think hi-fi gear is coming back into popularity. And I think the FTC sees that. And like I said, this was done the 16th of last month, 2024, this revision. And again, I'll put the link below. This is clearly on their radar. They clearly must be getting some complaints. And I'll look into this. I'll do a future update on this, that maybe we need to be sending complaints to the FTC, that maybe that's how they get things on their radar to go look at. We got to figure out a way to get this junk off the marketplace, or at least put them on a level playing field so people know that when you buy something like this, it's not going to make any power below 100 hertz. And that this isn't going to make 6.8 watts when you're trying to decide between this and some nice deckwear amp or some other manufacturer that makes a quality product that actually meets their specs. And honestly, even some of those guys have been pushing the envelope because they know they're competing against these false claims. And if they put the actual watts, like, hey, it starts clipping here. If they put, it's 1.5 watts is where it starts clipping on their ad, they won't be able to sell their products because somebody in China is saying, hey, ours will make 6 watts when it's really making less than 1. Yeah. And I know this is kind of a rant, but that's what my money monologue's for. Like I said, this popped up on my radar, this new ruling. Hopefully the FTC is going to start going after this. And if some of these retailers, like Amazon and some of these other folks that are selling this junk, and this isn't junk, it's just, again, I like the way this little amp sounds, so don't get me wrong. But it's not 300 watts. And honestly, it's not 55 watts at 1% distortion, which you don't want to listen to, that much distortion out of a solid state amp. I don't want to hear 5% of distortion out of a tube amp. So why are we rating the power at that? And then the consumers are sticking to that, hoping that, hey, this $100 amp is going to have better performance than a $3,000 amp. And then we got YouTubers feeding into that hype, which just makes all of this worse. And yeah, people are making money selling this stuff that's falsely advertised. And it's harming the honest people that are actually wanting to supply high quality stuff to consumers. And that's not fair. So that's all we're going to go over in the Monday Monologue today. I think this is an important enough topic to make this a single topic. Let me know in the comments what you think about this. Please share this video or share this information on forums and just broadcast this message, and let's get this problem fixed, because it's not only harming consumers, it's harming the industry, it's harming people that are trying to do the right thing, and it's just not fair. So thanks to all you Patreon supporters. Thanks to you folks that are subscribed to the channel and regularly comment and interact with me, etc. I am going to be taking a short little vacation here, so probably not going to see a lot of content, or you guys that are waiting on me to build you stuff, yeah, it's just going to have to wait. I need a break. And I am probably, too, going to take a break from working on re-engineering stuff like this and like this, because A, it's not my job, B, somebody else is making a bunch of money by selling products that aren't as advertised, and I really just don't feel it's my place to be fixing their products for them. And so I'm just burnt out. I'm tired of dealing with this. I want to work on my own stuff. This just isn't fun to me. This channel needs to stay fun, or this whole, whatever I'm doing needs to stay fun. And to do that, I got to stop working on this stuff. So probably just going to say no. People want to send me, stuff like this or other, stuff for me to review and modify and fix. It's just consuming so much of my time that I can't do the stuff that I enjoy. So anyway, we'll see you soon on the next Monday Monologue.